Not only did Mars not always appear in this manner, but it was not always like this. During the time that the region was initially formed, it is quite likely that seas covered the whole region. What would happen, on the other hand, if we were to bring all of the water from Mars back with us, so transforming the red planet into a planet that is half blue? If water and land were present on Mars in proportions that were equal to one another, what would the appearance of the planet be like? Is it even somewhat plausible that humanity could discover enough water to fill the oceans of Mars? What are the chances that something like that may take place? In addition, how is it even remotely possible that we have no other option except to use nuclear bombs on the planet that is red? Mars may have been submerged in a big body of water at some point in the distant past. This is a possibility that cannot be ruled out altogether. In addition, it is highly conceivable that rivers, streams, and lakes were dispersed across the entirety of the Earth at some point in the course of its existence. There is a possibility that many thousands of years ago, the climates of Earth and Mars were comparable to one another. There is a chance that this will occur. On the other side, the water on Mars would only cover 20% of the planet, but the ocean on Earth would cover 71% of the planet, and the temperature on the surface of Mars would be slightly lower. As a result of the atmosphere not remaining for an adequate amount of time, all of those things that took place were brought about as a result. Mars' protective magnetic field began to weaken some 4 billion years ago, which resulted in the solar winds beginning to take away all of the planet's atmosphere into space. This process began when Mars experienced the loss of its magnetic field. This process persisted until Mars was utterly devoid of any atmosphere at any point. Mars eventually underwent a transition that culminated in it becoming the planet that we are familiar with today. This transformation took place after a few 100 million years. In the past, Mars had a climate that was both warm and humid. The forecast calls for a dry and cool weather forecast. It is estimated that around 18% of its ocean is still present, despite the fact that it is surrounded by frozen polar ice caps. Therefore, if you wanted to transform Mars into a planet that is composed of half land and half ocean, you would need to significantly increase the amount of water that is present on the planet. The majority of the surface of Earth, on the other hand, is covered by seas, in contrast to the situation on Mars for the most part. I would be interested in hearing your ideas on the prospect of donating some of that water to our neighbor who is of the red hue. I am intrigued about your thoughts on the matter. It would be a horrible choice to proceed in that manner, if I were to be entirely honest with you. It would take 20% of the water that we have in our seas to make the waters on Mars as deep as the oceans on Earth. This would be equal to the depth of the oceans on Earth. This is the quantity of water that would be necessary to meet the requirements. If something like this were to take place, we would be doing a terrible thing to the aquatic life that we have. When it comes to issues that are of concern, the waters of the Earth should be left alone. Additionally, there are a few other locations in the solar system where water might be found within the system. These locations are not all present. All of these locations are located within the solar system. Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, and Europa, the moon of Jupiter, are two examples of objects that have moons. Others include the moons of other planets. It is possible that they contain twice as much water as the Earth does, according to some estimations. The other side of the coin is that in order to transfer even a small amount of that priceless water, you would have to bring enormous blocks of ice into space with you. It would be a challenging endeavor to take on the challenge of satisfying this need. In order to reach this goal, it is necessary to construct rockets that are capable of conveying exceptionally large amounts of weight. In addition to that, you would need to have funding. A considerable amount of the time. At a price of $1,500 per kilogram, or 2.2 pounds, respectively, it is plausible that this item may be offered for sale. It is estimated that the entire cost of this project would be far into the billions of dollars if the amount of water that would be required for this operation is taken into consideration. Already, I am aware of the cost of the item. On the other hand, there is a possibility that there is an extra medium through which water can be transported back to Mars. Due to the fact that it has nuclear weapons, you are going to absolutely appreciate this one absolutely. I have no doubt that you are going to adore it. You have grasped the meaning of what I spoke to you. In order to destroy the red planet, which is now in such a state, nuclear weapons are being designed and developed. More specifically, this would provide it with a source of water resources that it could draw from. The way that it is? If all of that energy were to be released at this time, it would lead to the release of carbon dioxide that is currently frozen somewhere on Mars. In the event that this were to occur, temperatures would increase, which would lead to the poles of the globe becoming less frozen. In the event that climate change were to be induced in a controlled manner in this location, the same thing would occur. If you were to carry out this task on your own, you would have to launch more than 3,500 nuclear missiles each and every day. This course of action would result in the United States delivering twice as many bombs on a daily basis as it currently possesses in its entire arsenal. This would be the case if the United States were to pursue this course of action. The quantity of radioactive material that is going to be discharged into the environment is going to be pretty substantial because of the situation. Or, to put it another way, it would not exactly make Mars habitable in any meaning of the word. On the other hand, in order to cover half of the Earth with seas, there would be a significant amount of additional water that would be required. Taking everything that can be taken into consideration, it would appear that deleting everything that can be seen is not the most successful technique. If you were to take this class, it is feasible that you would benefit more by learning about the history of planets than from taking this class. During the late bombardment period, which occurred roughly 4 billion years ago, Mars was subjected to a steady stream of asteroids that impacted with it. This bombardment occurred over the span of nearly 4 billion years. After all was said and done, this resulted in the formation of an ocean that was, on average, 300 meters, 1,000 feet, deep. For you to be able to do what you need to do, you will need to recreate this occurrence in the current day. More than 1 million comets and meteors would need to be guided in order for them to fall on a path that would bring them into touch with Mars. This would require a significant amount of effort. This is something that would be required in order for them to arrive in Mars. Because the comets would explode any time they came into touch with Mars, water vapor would be released into the atmosphere. This would be the result of the comet's collision with Mars. Keep going until you have collected enough water to cover 50% of the red planet. This is the most important thing you can do. Nevertheless, where exactly is this water going to be going in the future? You would discover that the majority of the freshly generated water on Mars is located above the equator of the planet if you were to explore the topography of Mars. This would be the case if you were to perform such an investigation. In the event that new land masses were generated on Mars, they would have the appearance of continents due to the fact that they would be similar but not identical. In certain regions of the Earth, there might even be mountains that stood out from the landscape that was all around them. Because of this, Olympus Mons, which is the highest volcano in the solar system, would now radiate outward from the newly formed Northern Ocean on Mars. This would be the result of the aforementioned phenomenon. However, even if you were successful in bringing in enough water to cover half of the Earth, there is no guarantee that it would be sufficient for the long term. This is because there is no way to know how much water you would bring in. Because of the low air pressure on Mars, it would be very easy for all of this water to evaporate off of the planet. One could say that this is something that would take place. In the event that water were to boil at a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, what would happen to the water if it were to boil? As a consequence of this, it is the temperature at which water on Earth starts to boil. On Mars, the water would begin to boil at a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, which is similar to 32 degrees Fahrenheit here on Earth. This temperature would take place on Mars. It is a really irritating condition, especially when you consider all of the effort that you put into transporting such a huge quantity of water to Mars. This is especially one of the reasons why it is so frustrating. The potential that all of this water vapor would operate as a greenhouse gas is incredibly high, but since it is something that you would have to pray for, it is something that you would have to pray for. In the event that it were possible to maintain a large amount of heat in the atmosphere of Mars, the planet would be transformed into a verdant paradise as a result of the terraforming process. There is a possibility that you will be the only person from Earth to ever go swimming on a planet that is not our own. This will be the case when that event takes place. It would be an amazing opportunity to go through this.